Hello everyone, I am Tacit, and I'm going to be going over the new Gems of War Mythic of the Zarg's Boom Pile. This will be in the drop table in Glory Gem Guild and VIP chests for the next week only, and then it'll be in the drop table with everything else. Overall, this Mythic is really good and has a lot of use cases going forward. So let's just go straight into looking at what he does, as he is 100% worth getting at least a copy of, and potentially even worth getting 2 copies of. So as far as his ability, he ends up destroying a 5x5 circle that is essentially a 5x5 without the corners, and then ends up doing a bunch of scatter damage boosted by red gems destroyed at a pretty decent ratio for early game, though probably falls off way later in the game. In best case scenario, this is actually only going to be doing pretty comparable to that of a truffle, which does it for pretty much like half the amount of mana and still infinite loops into itself. So for the most part, it's a pretty small amount of damage. Even in best case scenarios later in the game, you're doing like, what, 40 to all enemies, 50 to all enemies, assuming all 4 of them are alive. Of course, it does have the benefit, since it is scatter damage, to concentrate the damage as more things die. So compared to something like Truffle, it will do substantially more damage when there's only 2 or 1 enemy remaining. But at 3 and 4, particularly at 4, it's a pretty small amount of damage. However, the main thing that's beneficial is the amount of explode that it does, the amount of board control that you can do with it, and of course, like all goblins, has the gain an extra turn, or pretty much all goblins has the gain an extra turn. The other thing that's pretty interesting about it is, even though goblins cannot be 50% mana started, constructs can. You could end up doing this with the Geomancer hero class in order to give it a 50% mana start. So if you're doing a 4x Geomancer team, which we do have one we'll be going over when we go over teams and stuff like that, it can be 50% mana started, which is something that a lot of goblins do not have access to, or you have to build a really weird team with them to be able to go and end up getting that. So he is in the 50% category, since there's no 50% goblin at the moment. Beyond that, he does get to gain 1 magic whenever an ally casts a spell. Unfortunately, his ratio is pretty bad. He's only doing 1 additional physical damage every single time. Since he's not hitting all enemies or anything else, it's a pretty small amount of extra damage. But of course, the main reason why you would want to get a copy of him, or even 2 copies of him, is for his final trait. He ends up exploding 2 skulls when his turn begins. This is decent, but a little bit worse than, of course, his very similar alternative, which is Pharaoh, which ends up exploding 2 random gems when its turn begins. There are 2 benefits to this compared to the skull-related one. For one, skulls do not give you any mana, they just do some damage to the enemy, so you will be getting slightly less mana, since it will be auto-focusing on the one that is skull-related. The other thing that is a little bit different, of course, too, is that this will always do 2 random gems on the board. Obviously, there will always be 2 gems on the board. However, there might not be 2 skulls on the board. So for doubling up on Zarg, it might be, there will be situations where it won't get its full value, because if you're using 2 of them on your team, it does still stack. However, there has to be 4 skulls on the board on every single given turn in order for him to be able to do his 4 explodes if you're using 2 of them. And even for his 2 explodes, whether there's only 1 skull or even 0 skulls, he will do literally no explodes if there are 0 skulls. Whereas Pharaoh will 100% of the time always do its ability. So that is the main difference between them. More often than not, if you were to use one or the other, like if you have double Pharaoh and you're allowed to use it for a given restriction, you're still going to be running double Pharaoh. However, there are situations now where you'd run one of both, or even some rare circumstances, mostly under green, where you can't use this, or Takshaka, where you would end up going for because of course Takshaka doesn't use green. So there will be some situations where you will end up just ultimately using the new troop under either green restriction, or in situations where you can't use Pharaoh. So in both those 2 situations, yeah, this thing will actually start coming out. So let's go actually go get it, so we can go put it into all the teams and go show it. As we mentioned before, it's in the Glory Gem Guild and VIP chest for the next week. And we'll just do it through gem keys just to speed up a little bit. Can we get in the first pull? Yeah, okay, our mythic luck's coming around a little bit. Oh yeah, also another alternative for that is Emberclaw. It's basically cheaper Takshaka, in that it gets to convert a purple gem to an elemental star. He's kind of similar to this thing in that regard, in that if there's no purple on the board, it won't do anything, but as long as there's at least 1 purple, it'll still get his value. It's basically just budget Takshaka, and he's kind of like the same way compared to Zarg's Boom Pile compared to Pharaoh, in that it still basically does the same effect, like Takshaka to Emberclaw and Zarg's Boom Pile compared to Pharaoh, but there are situations where you're not going to have the condition, making it a little bit worse, though it does have a far more damaging, or at least more consistently damaging ability, at least compared to something like Pharaoh. While Pharaoh does have insta-kills off of Deathmark and all the Uber Doomskull things, this thing will more consistently get damage onto the board, though it does do less overall mana accumulation, though it does do it for every color rather than just brown. But anyways, let's go get into it. Go get it upgraded, go see what it could do in a couple teams. Definitely a great mythic. Oh yeah, that reminds me, actually do we want to go for 2? Do we go for 2 now? I do kind of want to go for the second one maybe later, but you know, let's just do it now. Let's see. We're on a lucky streak. Now we're going to take forever to get to the other one, though. Okay, wait, that wasn't too bad. We got 2 in under 1,000. Our luck is kind of turning around. I don't feel like I'm often going to use more than one. I feel like in most situations, 1 is perfectly fine for this guy. However, there are some very niche situations like green, pure green restriction, where you might be bringing him out, and for that reason, I actually do want to get a second. We have the resources for it, might as well. It's very, very rare, and you're perfectly fine just getting 1. But there are some super rare circumstances where, you know, more than 1 is perfectly fine. Ooh, do we go for the medals on him? I guess so. What does he get? He's actually, oddly enough, he's actually considered a support troop. I guess that makes sense because he's mostly doing mana accumulation to auto extra turn and a bunch of explodes. Is Pharaoh also considered this? Because it just gains a bunch of durability. But you know what? I'm fine with that. Let me go orb him up. Might as well. He's definitely going to be used a decent chunk of time. Let me double check this. What's his name? Also count as 1? No, oddly enough. I forget what symbol that is, but that is not the support one. Interesting. Alright, let me go and get him suited into all of his teams. And yeah, let's go mess around with them. And you know what? Why don't you bring them all into PvP as well? As I believe this guy can pretty much hold himself in PvP for a lot of these teams. So let's start all the way from the top. We will have to copy paste them one at a time though if we're going to do it that way, but that's fine. So first we have a pretty standard just run 4 times. That's not where I want to go. Run a 4 times goblin team. So let's go and... Oh, I still have the magic. I was doing the daily last night, and the bonus for it is still going. That's funny. But anyways, let's go get a... You know what? Let's go fight a Pharaoh team. I'll fight a Pharaoh team with this. That's not the team I want. Paste that in there. Alright, so first things first, 4 times goblin. Obviously the most obvious thing to end up doing with them. You gain a bunch of these standard goblin bonuses. Unfortunately, no magic. Though he doesn't really use magic that much. And as I mentioned earlier, Truffle in most situations will be getting more damage than him. Truffle isn't generally considered something that does a lot of damage, and this thing does even less, so that's pretty unfortunate for him. However, it is still damage, so you will still be damage pressure while doing a lot of mana accumulation. And of course, his main benefit is the 2 explodes that he gets every single turn. As you see there, we got our 2 explodes. It is over skulls, so we are going to by default get ever so slightly less mana, since every single skull is of course 0 mana, but isn't going to be too big of an issue most of the times. And of course he is Pharaoh, so he's also getting the 2 explodes consistently. So of course everything on this team, as are pretty much most goblins, has extra turn on it, so we can pretty much just start spamming everything. We have the string filler here just to get our initial silences if we need, as well as to get everything off the ground. We also have him for Green Storm, which unfortunately got overwritten by something on his team. However, if the enemy has nothing to overwrite your storm, you will have access to Green Storm, which will make it easier to get all your extra turns. Everything on your team except for Norbert's Turnip ends up using green. Of course, Norbert's Turnip is kind of here to hold down the line. It's generally used in every 4 times goblin team. The main benefit of it is that it's extra turn like all the goblins do. So you get to extra turn as soon as you have it fully maxed out. Ends up creating a bunch of green and red. If you currently do not have this weapon, there is no way to get it at this exact moment in time until you wait till the next Asian event. But if you do have it laying around, that's why it's on the high rarity team, you can end up using it for quite a bit of value, as not only does it feed green into everything on your team while having that auto extra turn, but it also of course feeds red, which will go straight into our new guy, so we can end up using him. So of course, as we mentioned earlier, we do have the 5x5 explode. Not sure if there's much we could really use on it, but it's 5x5 without the corners. It is a very, very, very annoying explode type to try to use, and for the most part, we're just gonna kind of just bulk it into some kind of big area. But yeah, 5x5 without the corners, very, very weird to use. Most of the time, you're probably just going to be spamming it down unless you really want to double check everything. Like a Guild War situation, if you're using it, obviously you're going to check every possible option. But in a lot of situations, you're probably just going to plop it onto the board and just go from there, as it's really, really annoying to get alignment on. The easiest way to probably try to get alignment on it is try looking for your middle 3. So since it does a 5x5, try to ignore the corners and just look for the middle, like 5x3 or 3x5, however you want to look at it, and see what kind of alignments you have off of that to see if you can end up getting a cascade. That's going to probably be your best bet. For example, if I do it right here, we could see that we're going to get a triple red. The main reason for this... Oh, no. Oh, no, it's going too far up. Never mind. Wait, no, I'm looking at it right. Because it's going to go 3 in every direction, basically, except for the corners. So this red will still survive. And then everything else here will explode. That red will come down into it, and then we'll get our little bit of red. Of course, the other benefit of him is, unlike Truffle, that will only do 61 damage to both these 2 enemies, it will end up doing the scatter damage, so it will concentrate all of the damage onto the remaining enemies. One other thing that's really good about him is his boost ratio is red. And what does Norbert's Turnip do? Green and red. Green feeds in like almost every goblin in the game, and red, while only feeding into this on this team, does get the boost ratio for it. So we could use it purely for his boost ratio, which is 15 extra damage per red that we do. So we're going to do it here, we'll go to get our extra little bit of red cascade, and we'll do it right. Let's make sure I did the right one here. Was it right here? Wait, gosh, I hate 5x5 without corners. 5x5 without corners is such a weird explode type. I think that's correct, right there. And there's our red that we were talking about earlier, and the concentrated damage. So we got our 3 times red, we got our concentrated damage, and it was still our turn. So we still could have kept doing stuff if we didn't already win the battle there. But yeah, if you want to take the time to use this ability, there's a lot of interesting things you can do by it. We have had things like Goblin Rocket, which has a 3x3 explode before. However, we've never had this exact shape of extra turn into auto extra turn. So this is basically just, in a sense, a really way stronger Goblin Rocket. And this thing used to be used quite a bit way back in the day, though it has kind of fallen off in momentum. But this thing has all the momentum you kind of need compared to it. So it's basically just modern Goblin Rocket in a sense, just with an upgraded everything compared to it, though with a higher mana cost to go with it. But it's basically just extremely upgraded Goblin Rocket, just under slightly different coloration is one way of looking at the troop. A more modernized version of it. Anyways, let's go for the double explode. So this is a pretty standard team that you've probably already seen. Actually, we were kind of already facing it, though it got replaced in the PvP thingy. But this is a very standard kind of setup in that... Oh, I didn't copy-paste it. Let me go copy-paste it. This is a very standard kind of setup where you're running Wand of Stars, whatever your best damage source is, Flower Dragon, Stellarex, whatever you have, into double Pharaoh. But in this case, we're running, of course, Zarg's Boom Pile. We're running one of each. One thing that's really nice between these two is that they cover every single color in the game, so you will always have access to one or the other. The other nice benefit of this is if you only own one Pharaoh, normally most teams that use Pharaoh utilize 2. However, of course, one thing that you do now is use Zarg's Boom Pile into Pharaoh. One thing you do want to be mindful of with this, though, is you do want to use the Zarg's Boom Pile in front of your Pharaoh. I'm not sure exactly how these will end up prioritizing, but generally how traits work is they prioritize from top left to bottom right, which means you want your Zarg's Boom Pile to target his 2 skull explodes before your Pharaoh does, because since the Pharaoh is doing random gems, that means it could include skull. So you want to make sure that your Zarg's Boom Pile goes first. So in most team compositions, if you're using one of both, you want to put your Zarg's Boom Pile in front of your Pharaoh Kafir, just to make sure that he does end up getting his 2 explodes. Otherwise, you might get 1 less explode out of it. So yeah, this is a pretty standard team, just kind of standard quick kill for a lot of PvP and a lot of game modes. It just allows you to now have a little bit more flexibility. Now you can run double Boom Pile, you can run one of each. It is still ultimately more useful in most situations to run double Pharaoh. However, one thing that's pretty nice about Boom Pile when you specifically using it Wand of Stars and or Stellarex, which I guess I should have switched to Stellarex, but either or works. But of course, elemental stars, when you end up creating them, they count as 4 colors: blue, green, red, and brown. The thing that's really nice about this is, of course, the Boom Pile uses far more of these colors. It uses all 3 of them, whereas Pharaoh only uses 1 of those colors. So if you're looking to get mana into a secondary thing, beyond just what your main damage source is, you will far more likely get your Zarg's Boom Pile to full mana than you will your Pharaoh Kafru, assuming that you're spamming just elemental stars, as he uses all 3 of the colors. Well, you know, 3 of the 4. He obviously can't use 4 colors, but he's using a good, or all of them, like every single one of them, so he gains his mana way more simpler than a Pharaoh would. Not like this team normally struggles to get mana, but it will make it a little bit easier to get mana into him compared to doing similar with a Pharaoh on your team, so ends up working a little bit better with that, especially if you were using a Stellarex variant of it. And as you can see, yeah, it's a very popular team. This, of course, it gets replaced, but this is just Wand of Stars, Stellarex into double Pharaoh. But yeah, now you can run double Zarg. Actually, let's go do one battle with double Zarg, might as well. And we'll even do the Stellarex just so we can get the full experience of it too. So we'll get the Stellarex in there, because of course he creates Elemental Star when he does his ability. Technically both. But, oh yeah, I forgot. It's actually even number of both. It's only Wand of Stars when you're spamming it that goes all in on one. So it's still relevant though. But anyways. Alright, so let's go do basically the inverse of this team, which is double Zarg Boom Pile instead of double Pharaoh. Obviously, his thing got downgraded, unfortunately. But, yeah, let's go just test it here just to kind of see. Of course, the biggest issue with this is there has to be at least 4 skulls on the board. Luckily, a lot of times, especially on starting board and stuff, you're going to have 4. But there are, of course, many situations where you're not, whereas you're always going to have, obviously, 4 gems on the board. With the 8x8 board, you will 100% of the time have 4 gems on the board, whereas it's not always guaranteed that you're going to have 4 skulls. I guess in this kind of situation with the Skull Storm going on, it is kind of helpful. But we'll just go do Wand of Stars. Of course, Elemental Star, he gets all the mana from, so it's a lot easier to go get him up. We'll do Stellar X here to try to get things rolling. And we actually have a boom pile here if we really want to. Actually have both boom piles. Of course, one slightly annoying thing with Pharaoh is all his damage is delayed. Or most of his damage is delayed. He creates a bunch of brown, which is really nice, but his 3 Doom Skulls, unless you have some way of popping it, is delayed damage. And of course, most notably, his Death Mark is delayed. You have to wait multiple turns. Obviously, it's an insta-kill if it does go off, but you have to wait for turns to go by. Whereas this guy's damage, you can do it, cast, get a bunch of damage, cast it again, get a bunch of damage, go back to your actual damage source, get a bunch of damage, go from there. And yeah, ends up working out pretty well. So it is definitely an alternative to consider going forward. As, yeah, if you currently don't have Pharaoh, if you don't have double Pharaoh, if you only have one Pharaoh, this can definitely help offset your main mana accumulation option. And, yeah, if you don't mind slightly not getting the explode sometimes, you can even go just double of them and be fine a lot of times. I feel like most teams will use 1 and 1 just to get a little bit more diversity. But, yeah, it's really good in that regard. A lot of meta teams can start using it, so very, very solid one. And now we're going to go for the low rarity team. Keep in mind, one thing that isn't low rarity here is Empress. We do have a Vault Event weekend going on right now, so you can Vault Event key for it. I was kind of hoping that this... I don't know. I never know what to consider tarot cards these days, because technically if you like power grind a Vault Event weekend, within like a month or two, you can get like pretty much every tarot card in the game if you really, really power grinded them. However, yeah, for this instance, I am considering it low rarity. However, if you currently do not have this, one thing to consider is Bone Golem. It is also a construct, and you use this as your tank. It'll drastically increase your amount of overall tank ability, gains a bunch of, still has the explode mechanic to go with it, has some Death Mark for some free kills, gains a bunch of attack and armor while having 50% reduction. So if you currently do not have this, just replace it for Bone Golem. However, the main premise of this team is Empress, Chalcedony, which boosts based on construct and will give you a bunch of mana. Obviously the new Mythic, which even though it is high rarity, you know, this is the low rarity team surrounding him. And we're using Black Manacle here. However, if you do have it, the other upgrade for this team is to go Ruby weapon. So yes, you can upgrade the Black Manacle to Ruby, or any other weapon that deals damage to all enemies that uses brown, ideally brown and purple, but as long as you just have brown, that'll be fine. And of course, the other thing is Bone. So going something like the Bone Construct if you want to go and not have Chalcedony. This team still works without having the magic boost. It just works extra better while having the magic boost. So if you want to go this way, this would be the other replacement that you can end up doing. But anyways, let's go get this team and go do this. And yeah, we'll still do this one in PvP. This one will struggle probably a little bit more, but we'll still give it a shot and see what we can do. Though against a team like that, it shouldn't be that as bad. Alright. So, main premise of this team is basically try to get Chalcedony running. Oh yeah, one thing I didn't mention, though, is pretty relevant to this, is Hero Classer. Hero class is set to Geomancer. You do not need to have it all the way upgraded, though it does gain quite a bit of nice perks going along the way. However, the main thing that's pretty noteworthy here is that it gains 50% mana start to all constructs. Oddly enough, also gets to gain a lot of extra magic. It gains 2 for being in the last slot, 3 by default. So a lot of extra base damage in an early game kind of perspective. Starting with 5 extra magic is definitely a pretty sizable amount. Anyways, if I'm not mistaken, the coloration for it works too, as I believe it gives brown weapons extra magic. So if you have all that max, you're getting 10 extra magic right at the start of battle, which is a great amount to kind of get the team rolling. However, that's not the only magic we end up getting. Of course, do I just take the green? I'm just going to take the green just to make sure we end up getting it. So here we can end up boosting our magic even further. So the main premise of Empress, if you are running this rather than the tank, is it gives a bunch of skills to everything for your last position. It also has a slight chance of extra turning based on how many green are on the board, but the main thing we're using it for is the huge amount of magic. This allows you to scale up whatever your best hero weapon is, ideally of the brown-purple variety, but definitely of the brown variety so you could feed it with Chalcedony. So for this, we'll just go to this, and boom. We went from 70-something all the way up to 135 additional damage. This team does not have a Submerge counter, so I am going to go and target this directly. Oh yeah, it has Stealthy too. Oh, that's annoying. Wait. While we use Chalcedony, we can keep doing that to get all the brown that we need. We will then go and keep Black Mana going down, or whatever your best brown weapon is. Black Manacle is just the most accessible, and we just keep going from there. We'll go and use this on as many reds as we could possibly take. Do that over here to get all those reds, get a bunch of split damage down. Oh yeah, Submerge does end up bypassing that too. We'll go for the Chalcedony poke just so we can go get the full concentration and hopefully kill that out with the guy. Worst comes to worst, we can also just go down the Black Manacle. Of course, every turn that goes by, we're getting the 2 explode, which is really nice. Black Manacle, not enough damage here. Let's go try to keep going for the extra turn, see if we can whittle it down. Unfortunately, this guy does not use brown, so he cannot end up getting up in this context, but it does allow you off of all the other mana accumulation, particularly the 2 per turn, to end up getting it up. And then we can just go for insta-kill once he's within chip range. And unfortunately, we didn't get our extra turn there, but he is in chip range to go and kill out, and we'll just kill it out with Black Manacle. 20% chance to devour each time too, which will make our hero nice and beefy to make sure it doesn't die, which also stacks really well with his 20% spell reduction. and it ends up just kind of winning from there. But yeah, you can end up also building this into 4 times Goblin teams, obviously just using lower rarity options, and ends up working out really well. As those are probably going to be the 2 main things that you end up using it for, I feel like, is 4 times Goblin and replacing it in pretty much the meta team. Now you have a little bit more flexibility, so now under green, instead of running Leprechaun or Bog Strider or both, you can now run double Zarg Boom Pile, something that wasn't possible until today. So actually, do we have green restriction? That would actually be the perfect thing to go show. We do! How convenient is that? All right, let me go grab that team real quick. Wait. That is so convenient. Hopefully my other team is already saved. I'm not sure because it was doing on mobile earlier. But hopefully it's saved over to PC. But yeah, that's perfect. Let me go show how this would work in green then. We'll do that as our last thing then. And of course, all teams are in the description below. Let's see. Or at least the 3 over there. I'm not going to show every other variant, but because there's a lot of different small variants you can make to these teams. But the core 3 teams that we showed will be there. And of course, adjust accordingly as you need. But normally I would run a Bog Strider or Leprechaun just into the standard damage kind of team. So here we have Bog Strider in first slot, Leprechaun in last, and then Wanda Stars and Stellarix in the middle. So this was, of course, always a pretty decent option to end up doing for it. However, the main reason this was done is because all of the really good modern mana accumulators you weren't really able to use. So Takshaka, I just spelled it wrong. Oh yeah, duh, because it doesn't show up here because you can't use it. But yeah, Takshaka doesn't show up here because you can't end up using it. You can't use Pharaoh here because he's not under restriction. You can't end up using, I don't know, what was the other really good one? I guess those were the main ones. Takshaka, that. Emberclaw? Yeah, Emberclaw was also not used. The other option for it because he's red, yellow, I believe. So all those options you weren't able to use. You were kind of forced to have to end up using some kind of Leprechaun variant. But now, of course, you know what can be used? The new Mythic that came out today. So now you can get rid of these. Boom, boom. Put the boom piles in. Obviously, if you only have 1, you can still go down like the Leprechaun or Bog Strider route in order to go and offset it. However, of course, if you end up getting 2 of them, you can now go basically just a standard Pharaoh team and go Wanda Star, Stellarix into double Zarg's Boom Pile, and then boom, you now have access to a bunch of mana accumulation. Instead of being forced to have to use Leprechaun, you can now go and use the Boom Pile or some kind of similar strategy. Or still even go down the Bog Strider. Of course, Bog Strider Leprechaun's still really good in a lot of situations. Could even still be stronger than this, potentially. But the main benefit of this is you get potentially up to 4 explodes every single turn, which the biggest issue with something like Leprechaun is he only gets really good turn 1 value. He doesn't get to keep doing that value every single time. So that's the main difference that you end up getting from it, is you get the perpetual value every single turn. So if you do fall behind, obviously PvP battles sometimes go a little bit longer, especially depending on your stats. Or just even the enemy stats, or if it has like 50% extra or anything else like that. So this guy definitely has a little bit more longevity compared to just casting a Leprechaun right at the beginning of a battle and going from there. Because you'll see on, oh, this guy already updated Zarg's Boom Pile. But I was going to say, on a lot of these teams, you're going to see Leprechaun, like, you know, the standard Wanda Stars, Flower Dragon, Leprechaun combo. This is what used to be used. But of course now, you have Boom Pile. We already see someone here going in power into double Boom. That's kind of funny. They're not even using a damage source. So they're literally using Zarg's Boom Pile as their damage source. I generally wouldn't advise that for the same reason why you shouldn't use Pharaoh as your only damage source. You can win as Pharaoh as your only damage source and Zarg is your only damage source. But they're way worse than like Takshaka as your only damage source. Like double Takshaka, triple Takshaka. Like the reason you can get away with triple Takshaka is because Takshaka is a damage source itself. While Zarg, Boom Pile, and Pharaoh can do damage, they shouldn't be the only way that you try to do damage. You couldn't still win that way. It's just relatively slow compared to if you own Stellarix or Flower Dragon or any other thing that does a lot. So I wouldn't really advise doing that, though it is an angle you can do. I guess even an angle to have a 3rd run. I really don't feel like you need a 3rd one, though. Almost every team you're ever going to use is only going to be 2. I feel like a 3rd is just overkill, because then you're getting to the point where, like, how many boards are you going to have where there's 6 goals on the board? Like, Pharaoh, at least, or even just, like, Takshaka, like, you're always going to be able to get it down and everything as long as you're not stunned. But it is very rare that you're going to have 6. There's even a lot of situations where you're not even going to be able to get the 4. So, yeah, I think double is fine. You're going to use one of him occasionally to offset your 1 Pharaoh that you have if you don't have double. You could do double up on him, but I don't think you're ever going to need the triple. It's just a bit overkill. But yeah, that is the new Mythic. If you still have any other questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. 100% make sure to go get it in the Glory Gem Guild and VIP chests in the next week. Also, of course, with guild chests, I don't normally mention it, but don't forget, if your guild doesn't already have it, to make sure you're at 40,000 seals. Sorry, that's not where you go. If you go over to guild and go over to seals, make sure that your guild is currently at 40,000. If you as a guild are not at 40,000 yet, make sure to claim your seals. And if you're still not there yet, you can offset it with any of the orbs that you have. so you can end up spending all your orbs. This does stack infinitely, so you can get that to close the gap of 40,000, so that you get the best possible rate, as the drop table for them is basically like gem keys when they are fully maxed, actually slightly better. You have a 0.11 instead of a 0.1 like gem keys have, so it's even slightly better. It's like you're doing a gem key and a glory key at the same time as far as its overall effectiveness, as it does have a 0.01 higher percent chance of giving you a mythic compared to a standard gem key, so even slightly better. But yeah, make sure you're at 40,000 before you go open them, and I 100% advise getting at least one copy of this guy. 2 of them if you want to have a little bit more flexibility with it, but 1 is perfectly fine. You can end up offsetting it with Pharaoh. It's 4 times Goblin team is never going to need more than 1 anyways, because you want to get the full team bonus whenever you're doing that, like the full Zacian, the full Goblin team bonus, everything like that. So Goblin team's never going to need more than 1. When you're using it with Pharaoh, you're never going to need more than 1. If you're offsetting it with something like Leprechaun, you're not going to need more than 1. So a lot of situations where 1 is still fine, but if you still want to go down the all-in route on green restrictions and a few other niche restrictions like that, you might want to pick up a second if you have the resources for it. But anyways, guys, I'll wrap it up for now. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, a wonderful Independence Day, and I will catch you guys later. Goodbye, everyone, and thanks for watching.